My name is Stewart Kwoh. I was the founder of Asian Americans Advancing Justice in 1983, so I've been there for 36 years. The background of Prop 187 was that the California community was in turmoil, partly because of economic troubles, and then there was a lot of scapegoating of immigrants. And so we were very concerned that there might be different propositions on the ballot that would scapegoat undocumented immigrants and also attack legal immigrants altogether. And so we were very concerned about the environment at that time in the early 1990s. And obviously the Prop 187 came on the ballot, promoted by the governor, then Pete Wilson. And so we were very concerned about the scapegoating and the level of the animosity towards immigrants. And so we were forced to spring into action. And of course, we allied with the Latino community, but those in the Asian community, we were concerned both about the Asian community being fooled by some of the rhetoric, but also we were concerned about the overall hostility towards immigrants in California. Well, we united with MALDEF in joining the lawsuit against Prop 187. We felt it was unconstitutional and certainly impractical in terms of withholding health benefits, but we felt it was unconstitutional because it was taking state law and have it supersede federal law. And so we joined the lawsuit. We had our own set of attorneys join in the court case. And fortunately, after a period of time, we were successful. But we did realize that a majority of people in California, a significant majority, passed Prop 187. So it did tell us that Latinos and Asians needed to stand up, including to be politicians and to be political leaders. And so I think we learned a lot of lessons during that period of time, especially that scapegoating can win over a majority of people, but we need to stand strong to protect the Constitution of the United States. And so we did have a team of lawyers working with the MALDEF attorneys and others to challenge Prop 187 in the courts. And so we're proud of that work. We're proud of the work that we did with groups like MALDEF, and we definitely look forward to continuing that work even now, especially in protecting the census, making sure that work can proceed without scapegoating. There was a majority of people who voted against Prop 187 from a divided community. Eventually, a majority of Asian Americans voted against Prop 187. So from that standpoint, we were pleased and relieved that a majority of Asian Americans did come forward and look at both their histories as well as their current situations and realize that scapegoating was not going to win over the day for them. And so we were pleased at the results that a majority of Asian Americans voted against Prop 187. Well, of course, this came on the heels of the LA civil unrest in 1992. So there were tensions between parts of the Asian community and parts of the Black community. There were also some underlying tensions between parts of the Asian community and parts of the Latino community, although that didn't result in a lot of civil unrest. And so we were concerned about the level of ignorance in our communities about each other, and that we were concerned that there had to be other solutions than these kinds of propositions, or obviously other than civil unrest, to address them. We started in 1991 a program called Leadership Development and Interethnic Relations because we were so concerned that Asians and others were isolated from each other. So we tried to develop a leadership development program that was multi-ethnic in character and where people could learn from each other about their own histories, but also learn collaboratively how to solve different problems. So, for example, in the LEADER program, Leadership Development and Interethnic Relations, we had a exercise or a project where people would work in different communities together to solve a common problem. And so we felt that there had to be much more interaction between the communities. When the very beginning, I think people were caught off guard, and so they felt, oh, well, maybe this is necessary to pass and get over with some of the challenges of undocumented immigration. However, many of us felt that this was anti-immigrant and was not going to just target undocumented people. And as a matter of fact, there were a lot of Asian Americans who were undocumented as well, at least 10% of the population, if not more. And so we felt we had to stand up in solidarity with Latinos and other immigrants, and we felt that this was unconstitutional because it was taking a state law and superseding federal law. So we felt for all those reasons we need to stand strong against Prop 187. From a divided community, we saw a majority of community members come out against Prop 187. I think that the various arguments that this was anti-immigrant, that the Asian community was also going to be affected, that immigration was not a quote-unquote Latino issue. It was a broader issue for all Californians, in fact, all Americans, but it was also an attack on Asians because a number of Asians were undocumented, a number of Asians were certainly 2/3 of the population, greater than the Latino community, were immigrants. And so the argument that I think won out is that this is an attack against immigrants, and it's not just an attack against one ethnic group. In California especially, Asian Americans have a long history of being discriminated against and being attacked for being immigrants. And so I think people in our communities realized this was an attack against immigrants, and we needed to stand together. We needed to stand strong in solidarity, even though one segment of the community was being attacked perhaps more than other parts of the community. There were historic circumstances, for example, the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, who stood with the Chinese? And then that was later applied to all of the Asian groups. There was actually an Asiatic barred zone where people could not immigrate from. And so there was hangings in Los Angeles in 1870. So there was a very clear knowledge that what happened to one part of a community affected the whole community. And we needed to stand together against this onslaught of hostility and adversarial feelings towards immigrants. We also knew that Asians and other immigrants were oftentimes scapegoated for the problems in society. And we realized that that just was not true, and that furthermore, kicking out undocumented students from public schools, denying health care, denying different social services that needed to be afforded to everyone was really the wrong solution to the problem, that there were solutions like looking into bolstering the economies in Latin America. There were solutions like looking at whether employers were treating people well and that should not be an incentive for some employers to take advantage of undocumented immigrants or any immigrants. And so we realized we needed to call on the best and the recollection of our own history in order to galvanize the community against Prop 187. We were relieved that a majority of Asian Americans did vote against Prop 187. And because of our standing in especially the legal community, we felt we needed to ally with groups like MALDEF and others to oppose Prop 187, even though it had passed, to oppose it in the courts, because we felt it was unconstitutional and illegal. Well, many of us went to different coalition meetings. I went to many coalition meetings, both with community activists as well as lawyers. And so we were very much opposed to the proposition. We also felt there needed to be a lot of education in the communities. So we did a lot of press conferences targeting the Asian press and media. And so we did that sometimes weekly to really get the word out that this was really a bad proposition for the whole community, and that both because it was going to target Asians, but also target other immigrants, especially Latinos, we needed to stand together to oppose it. So we had many meetings to create an opposition to this horrible proposition. And fortunately, that was successful in the main. We have a history where sometimes Asians stand up for each other, sometimes they don't. Like I said, in 1882 with the Chinese Exclusion Act, there wasn't the ability to stand together. During the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, other Asian groups didn't necessarily stand against this unconstitutional rounding up of 120,000 Japanese Americans. And we wanted to make this a different case where we would stand together, not only for Asian Americans, but also to protect Latinos as well. And so we were fortunate that that started around the Prop 187 time. And even to this day, we've seen Japanese Americans and other Asian Americans speak out against the Muslim ban, to stand in solidarity with Arabs and South Asians who were being targeted after 9/11. And so there is a history where we're proud that the opposition against Prop 187 led to people feeling freer to express their opposition to anti-immigrant propositions and anti-immigrant bills, even to this day. Back in 1994, there were a lot of tensions between the communities. There were tensions, as I had identified. In 1992, there was civil unrest, and part of the civil unrest dealt with tensions between parts of the Korean community and parts of the Black community in Los Angeles. So there was a lot of tension there. And that came about because Korean immigrants were doing business in largely African American communities, and there were charges of treating people unfairly and not hiring people. There were a lot of those tensions. I think underneath that, there were tensions between some in the Chinese community and some in the Latino community, because in the San Gabriel Valley, for example, there was a big influx of Asians, particularly Chinese, buying homes, et cetera, that Latinos resided in. So there were different tensions at that time. And so I think that there were some politicians who were trying to exploit those tensions and tried to target undocumented immigrants as the source of these problems. As a general note, there was a recession in the early 1990s. There was economic pressure besides social pressure. And so I think that there were different tensions that existed. I think that what we were able to do, not just in court, but even before the court challenge of Prop 187, is to get people to understand our own histories, that the history of Chinese being discriminated against during 1882, that there was the internment of Japanese Americans, that there were attacks on immigrants as a whole, and that when you attack immigrants as a whole, it's bad for society. It doesn't solve the problems. It's wrong-headed. And so we were able to show people that we needed to stand together and work out the different problems, because there were real problems, but do not scapegoat immigrants. Do not scapegoat any one group of people, because that is going to lead you in the wrong direction, and it doesn't solve any problems. So we were able to get that point across, and I think people did start coming together. And like I said, because of Prop 187's movement in trying to unite people against an unconstitutional proposition, I think in this period, we've seen Japanese Americans and other Asians, for example, coming out in support of, we call them AMEMSA communities of Arabs, Middle Eastern, South Asians, coming forward to say, trying to ban Muslims or trying to attack people because you think that they're so-called terrorists is wrong-headed, is taking us in the wrong direction. What we need to do is unite together and work together to identify different problems and work together to solve those problems. That's going to advance us as a society much more than any kind of scapegoating ideas. Well, I think that first of all, people have to understand different problems, and they have to understand them more deeply. And so there's no substitute for education and to really understand the depths of different problems and the different dimensions of those problems. I think otherwise it's very easy to scapegoat somebody or some group as the cause of the problems, and that's just wrong. And so number one is education, because otherwise we get fooled by different politicians who come along with different scapegoating ideas. Secondly, we have to stand strong for the Constitution of the United States and be able to fight back whenever we need to. And so there needs to be solidarity, especially amongst minorities, to fight against scapegoating, to fight against unconstitutional bans, to fight against unconstitutional actions wherever they stem from. I think California is in a better place because people have learned that just trying to take advantage of undocumented people is not the right solution. And so we find that today refugees have no place to go, that we're not looking at building the economies and dealing with the harsh realities in, for example, Central America. There has to be an educated way to address the different issues, and we need to maintain our humanitarian values. Otherwise, we fall into many different traps. Again, I reference how Japanese Americans and other Asian Americans stood together with people who are from an Arab or South Asian background who were attacked after 9/11. And so we need to learn that we need to stand in solidarity And there are recent examples of that. And I think we're drawing on our own history where Asians were attacked as immigrants. And so we need to stand together. One of the key philosophies is that an attack on one is an attack on all. And I think we have to really understand that this is a time period, even now, where there is a lot of scapegoating going on, where different groups, like dealing with the Muslim ban, are being targeted just because of their backgrounds, just because of who they are, not because of what they've done. And so I think that kind of philosophy is wrong and is scapegoating that particular group. And I think our history as Asian Americans, our history as Americans, is such that we need to understand that scapegoating is wrong, that it's not going to solve the problems, that you could blame one group for the economic malaise or economic problems, or you could blame a group for terrorism. But if you blame a whole group, it's just wrong. It leads you down the wrong path. It leads you away from real solutions to understand what is the real problem, what are the real solutions, what is the real way we can unite as a country and as a people. And so I think the Asian American experience, the exclusion of Chinese in 1882 that was later applied to all the Asian groups, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, definitely need to influence how we see the current day. And we need to stand together in solidarity against attacks on one, because they are attacks on all. And so we have to look at what are some of the common issues that we are grappling with today and stand in solidarity. So for example, we understand that mass incarceration is really a blight on many, many communities. And in particular, they affect African Americans and Latinos as big targets. We need to stand in solidarity to look for other solutions than mass incarceration. Solutions like providing health services, providing jobs, providing further means of survival. And that is going to be a much deeper solution than scapegoating people and putting them into prisons. So there's a lot of different issues where our communities need to draw on their past lessons and their past history to guide the future. It's unfortunate that the anti-immigrant sentiment affects not just the United States, but worldwide, particularly in Europe. So in Europe, the largest or the second largest parties oftentimes are anti-immigrant parties. In the United States, I think people would understand that President Trump won the election in large part because of his anti-immigrant rhetoric. And so I think that the issue of immigration, real or perceived, has affected the worldwide community. I think that that's wrong, that we need to look for different solutions. As a matter of fact, there's many studies that show if you incorporate immigrants and refugees into your societies and provide economic opportunities, they actually will benefit the community economically, not just socially. And so, but the fear of immigrants taking away jobs, or the fear of immigrants taking on too many social benefits, is something that paralyzes people, frightens people. And the reality is actually oftentimes just the opposite, that if you incorporate people, if you treat people humanitarian-wise, that they actually contribute more to the society and to those communities. We've seen that many times in the United States, where immigrants have gone into communities and have revitalized communities. They've made them stronger. And people who stayed, white populations that stayed, benefited as well. So I think that there's a lot of ways that we can introduce better ways to treat immigrants and refugees, and that we can show that that actually will lead to a stronger community, not a weaker community, a more united community, not a divided community. But a lot of times the rhetoric frightens people. Sometimes it frightens people who are not even in immigrant communities. It's just used to frighten people and to scapegoat people. That's just wrong. And so we need to do a much better job at education, because we don't want more Prop 187s around the country. We don't want anti-immigrant bills and propositions, and we don't want anti-immigrant politicians using this kind of rhetoric to frighten people and to get people to do things that are wrong-headed. An easy example is Koreatown. Koreatown, in the very beginning, 20, 25, 30 years ago, was a very small community that really didn't have much economic vitality. But the Korean American community, as well as the Latino community in the area of so-called Koreatown, really have revitalized that whole area so that the buildings, the businesses, the schools have flourished. And so I think that's an example where people did come together and built up a brand new community in the last few decades. So I think there are examples where immigrants have contributed to the cities or to the counties, and that is the positive development. Asian Americans are 2/3 foreign-born, much more than Latinos, who are 40-something% foreign-born. So the foreign-born have to be, especially the foreign-born, have to be educated that the census is going to help everybody, that having a good census, like the last census, we had a low undercount of Asian Americans. We were successful in getting the word across that documented, undocumented, whatever ethnic group that they're from, they needed to be counted. And so in the last census, we had a relatively low undercount. We want that to continue. So we need to continue the education that everybody who lives in the United States and is a resident of the United States needs to be counted, because it's going to affect billions of dollars in money coming to local communities. It is going to affect health and education and transportation. And so all of these measures need to be put forward to the population, that the census is very important and that people who are here, even in an undocumented way, need to be counted. So we have our work to be done. We received the largest state grant for the Asian American community, and so we needed to come forward as best we can. We think that the census questions, there was a fear of some of the census questions asking for citizenship, and one of our partners challenged that with MALDEF in court, and they prevailed. But we needed to look into whether or not the Asian community is going to be fearful of some of the attacks on them, potential attacks on them, by answering the census. And we need to convince people that they are safe, that the census information is kept confidential, that we will stand with them, because the census is so crucial, especially for growing communities to be counted, especially the Latino and Asian communities. We were the fastest growing communities in the United States, ethnically speaking. And so we needed to really come together and see how we can stand together to make sure that the vast majority of our communities understand this, and that everybody feels they can be counted. That's a crucial common effort that we have. I think that's where we can join with the African American community that is also growing. And so the African American, Latino, and Asian communities are growing in the United States. We need to get them to come out to really express through the census that they are here, that they're not going away, that this is our home, and we can build a better country together.